Welcome back to Murph Code's Python tutorial where we are building a thing. I think. Aren't we? Maybe? Anyway, if you've been following along with this series, we've created a CRUD file manipulator thing. Not sure what you would call it. And then last time we turned it into an object. So all of our functions are now methods. But we still have all this stuff where it's printing out to the command line and like we don't have a graphic user interface. Well, we're gonna fix that today. Because today, we're gonna learn about graphic interfaces. Now, when it comes to graphic user interfaces, you have a number of options available to you as a Python developer or a Python programmer. We have tkinter, which is the one that comes with Python. It's just the standard library. wxPython, which is an open source Python interface. There's also Python, PyQt, which is pretty good. And then there's JPython, which is a port of Java that gives access to the Java class library, so you can use the user interface there. But we don't want to be importing some other thing and having to download another module and set up a virtual environment so that we can keep that up to date and remember when we're using it and not having to, you know, have it get in the way when we don't need it. We're just going to use tkinter, which is a TK interface, the one that is prepackaged with Python. So no extra need to download anything. That's all you need to do to get started right there. And it's already installed. It's ready to go. Now, before you may have seen us do this thing here. And you may see some code around that they capitalized the T on the tkinter. In a previous iteration of Python, Python 2, which is still quite popular and still around. There are some differences between Python 2 and Python 3, though. Python 2 uses a capital T in its tkinter module. Not really sure why they did that, but they did that. So, Python 3, though, the one that I walked you through how to install, and the one that should start with Python 3 when you start up idle, we'll use a lowercase t. So, job equals, we're gonna, from our imported tkinter module, we're going to call the tk method. Now, we've only covered object-oriented programming very briefly. Very, very briefly. But basically what this is from this module, we're using this method. We don't need to create an object before we can call the method. It doesn't require an instance of tkinter. in order to create whatever. The output of this, though, will create us an object. It will create us a tkinter app object. And to kick off our app object, we call the main loop. What this does is it triggers the drawing mechanism of our window. Now, we're going to build this out into an interface that can interact with our Cruddy Buddy. However, for now, I'm just going to use it as, showing you some examples on how to construct these windows. Because it's not just, you wave a magic wand and suddenly there's a window that does everything for your application. No, you kind of have to design the thing. In fact, it helps if you draw out what you want your app to look like ahead of time, and then just set up the widgets you need as you're going through it. So let's see what this does so far. There it is, our little tiny window. This window right here was created by those 3 lines of code that we made. Like this right here. We did that with 3 lines of code. I know, super exciting. But, it really doesn't do anything. So that's all well and good. How do we get it to do something now? Good question. We have to add some widgets. Widgets are the things that are like the buttons and the labels and stuff. In fact, probably the most common one that you will see. Python hurts your brain, huh? Well, only because you're not used to it yet. Trust me, though, it's way easier to learn than, like, C or Java or anything else, because with those 3 lines, we've already got a window. With any other programming language, it's a lot more than 3 lines. A lot more than 3 lines. Alright, so one thing I want to do is I want to add, we're going to make a button object. Alright? We're going to do this before we call the loop that sets everything in motion, because we want all of our widgets created and applied to our app object before we start the actual program, because otherwise there could be some weird effects. It'll draw half the stuff and then half the stuff will just kind of fade, fill in later. Unless you're purposely going for something like that, you want it to be professional. You want to make all your objects before kicking off that main app window. So, button takes a few parameters. The first parameter is known as the master. This represents the parent window or the parent widget of our widget that we're currently working on. So the first thing we put in here in our list of arguments is, what do we want to add our button to? We're going to add it to top, because we made that there. Whoop. I see what you're doing. Okay, there we go. Alright, so top is our app object. To our app object, we want to add a button object we're going to call W. All right, now, after we have told it what object we're going to add this to, we have to define it. We have to give it some character. One of the biggest options you're going to want to remember here is the command option. And the way you just do this is command equals, and then after that you're going to put in whatever it is you want this button to do when it's clicked on. Usually the way we would do this is we would define a function, and then we can assign this let me see here. Do I need parentheses on that? I probably need parentheses on that. No, I don't need parentheses on that. I don't put the, or I don't need quotes on that, and I don't need parentheses on that. All right, so when we click this button, it's going to call our click button 1 function, which we're defining right here. Now, I don't know if I showed you what this does, but this is just the same as the sys exit that we did last time. Actually, do I still have that open? But yeah, the way we were closing out our program before, same thing. And we're just giving our app an exit button. That's all this is. First argument that goes into our button object is the window that we're going to be applying the button to. You can nest widgets within widgets. There's a frame object that you can use to organize your widgets. So, like, you don't always add the top level window here. We might have some frame objects later that we add to top, and then we would add our buttons to the frames, and then the buttons get added to the app when the frame gets added to the app. So it's a whole nested, Russian nesting dolls thing there. So it's not always going to be whatever you made your app object for that first argument, but for now, that's what we're going to use. Later, when we're doing a bit more layout control, we'll use the frame object, and then we'll add our widgets to the frame, add the frame to the app, and that adds all the widgets to the app. So, but for now, this is all we need right here. Now, we could also do some fancy stuff and like add foreground and background color. Let's see here. You know what? Let's make the foreground color red. Now I can't remember if this uses. No, I think this uses. I think this uses hex code. If you're not familiar with hex code, you just put a hash in the front of it, and then the first two numbers control how much red, second two control how much blue, the last two control how much green. And it's on a scale of 0 to F, where it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, A, B, C, D, E, F. how much you want is, this is the lowest, this is the most, and it's 2 digits, just like numbers, so you would go with, you know, one of these in the tens place for your increments of 10, or 16 in this case, because we're using 16 possible values, and then the finer control in the secondary place. Altogether, you get like 256 or something like that possible combinations of, I don't know. You get a lot of fine-tuned control with the color. But anyway, this is pure red. Just red. Super saturated red. And we're doing that in our foreground. Now, that's all well and good, but wouldn't it be great if we actually had something to read? You can set the text that goes on your button. Now, all of these you can put in any order you want, I think. I don't believe there's any specific order. As long as you're just putting the property, equals, and whatever the value is, you can put them in whatever order you want. Alright, better get rid of this garbage before I go and run it, because that's going to error stuff out, because that's just nonsense. File. Save. Oh. I almost forgot something. Because all we've done here so far is created the object, and while we may have assigned it to a top-level widget, we haven't actually added it to the top-level widget. We need to call one of our widget objects layout managers. There are 3 kinds. There's the pack, there's the grid, and there's place. Pack is probably the easiest to use. You don't have to add any kind of arguments if you don't want to. Grid, you would add row and column. Place, you would give an X and Y value. I'll show you what each of these does. You know, let's go with a different value there. Now I might have grid, the syntax incorrect there, but anyway, save, run module. Button is not defined. What? I keep forgetting there's some weird syntax grammar here. Did I? Just import the whole darn thing. All of it. Like, I'm not real particular. We don't have to get fussy here. There we go. Alright. Let's make this bigger. Now, as you can see, we've got a button. It's not real big. It's got the word exit there. We can add more value, more key value pairs to our definition here to change the size and shape, and you know, whether we want the text to be bold and whatnot. I'm not going to run through every possible property though, because there are a lot of properties that you can set for each of your widgets. But when we call pack, it sticks it in there as the first object, and if we put more in there, it would just stick them right along next to it, and eventually it just fills up the space. Let's see. We want to see what grid looks like, though, don't we? Okay. So, with grid, I don't usually use grid. We can set a row and column. And what this does, I'm not trying to minimize it. I'm trying to make it bigger. There we go. Okay. So what this does is, if we look at our code, put it in the first row, column 0, which is the leftmost column. There's probably a row 0, but because we didn't put anything in it, the whole thing is just collapsed. So, like, if you actually want a row and column to take up any kind of space, you have to put things in there. Otherwise, it's nothing. But essentially what this does is it has divided up our layout into rows and columns. And when we go to run the geometry manager, it puts it in the first row, well, the technically second, because numbering in programming, because programmers have to be difficult, starts at 0, so it's always 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're in the second row. We're in the first column, the leftmost column, second to topmost row, even though we have nothing in the topmost row, so there's nothing there. Now, if we wanted to have a little more control over our placement, if I'm not using pack, this is usually the one that I go with, because I'm used to working in pixels. And as you can see, our button is no longer wedged up in the topmost corner. There's some space around it. If you haven't figured it out, the X and Y determined how much space. X is left to right. Y is up and down, which is why there seems to be twice as much space between the top of our button and the side of our button. So, we could switch this. And now you'll see there is, I mean, it's a little hard to see, but there is twice as much space between the side and the top because we switched those two numbers. But this one gives you the most fine-tuned control of where you want your button to go. But it does not take into account where other things in your layout are. It only takes into account the object that it's inside of. So if we were to stick this in a frame object, which we'll get to using later, it would be the X and Y coordinates within that frame object. And then you would use another packet, another layout manager function method to determine where the frame goes. So it's a whole nesting doll thing. It's kind of crazy. It's a little annoying at times. But anyway, that's all you got to remember. Pack, super easy. There are options you can feed it, like, you know, that would tell it, oh, you want the widget to be on the far left or at the bottom. if you want that kind of level of control, and that's fine. With grid, there are some other options, like you could tell it how many columns you want it to span, so that, you know, if you wanted it to take up 2 cells across in the grid layout, you could do that. You can also add pixels around the object to pad it so that it adds a little more space around it. Let's see here. Tired. Been up kind of early because little boy is home from school today, but he decided that he was still going to be up at his normal time. Alright, so we've got our button. We know a little bit about how to use geometry layouts. We'll see more as we add stuff, so don't worry about that. But to be on the simple safe side, we're just gonna use pack, and we're just gonna throw things on there, and whatever kind of layout they end up in, that's just, you know, we'll deal with it. All right. So we have a button. We have a button that closes things. What else would we need if we were, say, to convert our Cruddy Buddy? But where is my... There's my Cruddy Buddy object. Because what did we need here? We ran this module. Well, first, we need to be able to send a message out to our users. Even when we have a window, like the only text we've sent out so far is this TK and the text on our button. I mean, super fancy, sure, but what if we wanted that to say something else instead of TK? Let me see here. Name. I'm probably going to do this wrong. It's been a while since I've had to use graphic user interfaces for a thing, so bear with me. It's not name. Title. There we go. Okay. By setting the, or by feeding the what we want for our what am I trying to say here? All right, our TK enter TK object, which we've assigned this label, has a method that we can feed a string of text into, and that will set the title for our widget window. There we go. Welcome to Karate Buddy.
Now, one thing else we can set with this is we can set the actual geometry. Of the window.
Because I want to stop having to stretch this out every time. And thankfully, these are just simple properties.
I stand corrected. That did not do anything. I'm not sure why that didn't do anything. Why didn't that do anything?
Let's try this. We'll use the max size method. We'll do 300 by 200. That really didn't do anything either. It just made it so that we limit how big we can make it.
And that's all the bigger it's going to get.
Well, you know what we do when we're stuck. We call for help. Give it a second. This is going to take a while. Because it's 25,668 lines of documentation. Yeah, that's fine. We can do that. Okay. There we go. somewhere in here, it's going to tell us how we can set the size of that stupid window. Okay, we've got a lot of stuff here. Let's try to narrow this down. $947 lines. Okay, that's smaller. Alright, so we do have a WM method. This is a lot of what programming actually is. Looking up how to do stuff. No programmer has everything memorized. If they claim to, they're either incredibly crazy or incredibly naive to think that they have it all memorized. I've been doing this for... Let's see here, how old am I? 25 years? And I still don't have stuff memorized. I still have to look up stuff. Doesn't matter which language. I started programming with BASIC. I've learned JavaScript, I've learned Python. I've learned all kinds of crazy stuff. But the thing you always end up doing is having to look stuff up. You always end up having to look stuff up. Okay, I'm pretty sure it's geometry. Alright, we'll try that. That's not my... Here we go. Okay. This might seem like a very, convoluted kind of way to get to what we're trying to do. But it also is a very convoluted way of trying to get to what we're trying to do. 400 by 600. Do I need this in... I don't know if I need this in quotes or not. So we'll put that in quotes, see what happens. Okay. Now we're able to resize things. Or at least this is how we're able to resize our window. So that when it runs, it starts at the size that we want it. I put 400 with 600 height, so it's taller than it is wide. Normally, you would go the other way. If you want a more portrait view. Alright. And then, say we don't want people to be able to, well, don't want people to be able to resize it. We've already seen max size. Helps if I can spell. There we go. Now they can't make it any bigger. Can they make it smaller? Probably, yeah. I mean, we could probably set a min size too. We should go a little bit bigger. Let's go... Nah, we'll go 600. Nah, that seems a bit big. 480 by 320. All right. There we go. We can now no longer resize it. We can't shrink it. We can't do anything to it. It is permanently that size. I know, super fantastic, right? But being able to control the size of your window is kind of important. Anyway. These are all the ways in which we do that. The one weird one is probably this one, where you do your width and height as a string separated by an X, and you assign that to new geometry. The rest of these, min and max size, width and height, are properties that you can set within them. It's fine. Just keep that in mind as, you know, ways to set up your window. We're probably going to want some more space on this, so we're going to go to 600, 400. Whoop. For now. There we go. A little bit bigger. A little bit easier to see. And we can change those if we want. In fact, we could even set constants of... Helps if I can spell. Really can't spell today. Okay. Whoop. They're right about that, you know. Gotta add a second parentheses at the end to close that. I know what I did. I know what I did. I tried to shortcut this. I tried to just put everything into one string function, expecting, oh, that'll turn all of it into a string. That's not how that works. There we go. I had to put both of these in their own separate string function so that they could be combined together instead of trying to add them like they're math. Because it's not math. It's concatenation. Big fancy word that means taking strings and tacking them together. Alright, so now, as we're developing, if this window ends up not being big enough, we can change it here instead of trying to fix it here. And remembering all three places that we have to change it. We only need to change it once. So if we want to make it a little bigger, just a little bigger. It's that easy. I say as if any of this has been easy so far. Alright. So we saw how to add a button, but it just kind of tacks the button there. Which, you know, I'm not a huge fan of that. We now know we're using an exact size of 720 by 480 currently. We can use math to now place our button. Let's say we want it at the bottom, but not quite all the way at the bottom. First we'll set the X coordinate. Let me mash them together a little bit. Normally you'd want to put spaces between your equals and stuff, but when we're adding them, or when we're making them arguments inside of a function or a method, I like to eliminate that little bit of space when assigning it to, you know, one of these predetermined properties that they're looking for. Now, we didn't set a width for the button, but we could do that. I'm just not sure how to go about doing that. Let's see. That's still open. Oh no! We killed Idle. That's not what we wanted. Mistakes were made. Come back, Idle. We love you. Okay, Idle's back. Herp. The name button is not defined. Are you sure about that? There we go. Now it's defined. Yes, it's only 1,000 lines. It's fine. Okay. We're not looking for how to place the button. We're looking for how to size the button. This time. Thankfully, sizing our widgets is pretty universal. Once we figure out how to do it for button, we know how to do it for everything. And it's probably going to be quite the same as with our window object. Here we go. Alright, we can do that in the place, apparently. So, let's see. How big do we want this button to be? It's an exit button. We could probably make that, you know, I don't know, 60 pixels. I'll explain what exactly is going on here in a moment. Let's see, we're gonna go with, we'll do like a 60 by 30. See if that worked. Okay. It appears to have worked. Now, what I did here was some placement math. I do this a lot when I'm doing JavaScript with Canvas and stuff. I know the width and height. I want the button to remain the same size no matter how big the window is, even though we have the window predetermined in size. So what I've done here is I take the window width and divide it by 2. That gives me the exact midpoint of the window. But since I don't want the button to start at the midpoint, I have to take half the button's length and subtract that from the midpoint to move that button over so that it sits right dead center on the central line, which is why this is 30 instead of 60. So I could do a constant here. And this would literally just be and with this we should get the exact same result. Exact same result. Now, what if I decided to make this a bit bigger? Our button still sits exactly the same height from the bottom, right dead center. This is the method I use for placing widgets, because it gives me fine-tuned control and I can be exact without having to know exact numbers. So no matter what size I set this window to, this will be the same distance from the bottom of the window as its height. And I can even change the dimensions of the window and the button individually just by using the definitions I have here. So let's say I wanted to double the size of this button. The button has doubled in size. It is still its exact height away from the bottom. It's still sitting dead center, left to right of our app. And it doesn't matter what size we change the window to. Still stays properly aligned. Now, we could use the package managers, pack and grid, to probably do something similar, but this is my preferred way of doing it. Pack, I usually just use if I'm just throwing the widgets on there without much thought as to where they have to go, because it works without any extra stuff. But I use place for things like this, which looks like a whole lot of what in the world, but I only have to write it out once, and then I can test it by changing these values however which way I want. Okay. We killed our idle again, didn't we? Oh no. We've still got idle right here. What was I thinking? Okay, so we've created a window. We have given that window a name. We have put a button on the window, but just one, and the only thing it does is it exits the program. We need to start figuring out how to take information from our user and doing something with it. Otherwise, this is going to be a really, really boring program. So in order for us to prompt the user, we would use label. We'll just pick a random letter. And again, we're just going to add this directly to our app here. We're not going to get fancy with it. Not this time. All right. Now to make this say anything, we're going to use that text property again. Same one as the button. All right, and what did our file ask for the first time we ran it? When we did the Cruddy Buddy? Enter a file name, it said. Alright, now, in here, we can change... we can do that similar property with and height. So we could change the size of our label if we want. Now this is probably going to be too small. Whoop. That's not what I want. There we go. Oh, you know what we forgot to do? We forgot to add it to the thing with the package manager. We want this to be, you know, probably up near the top. So, we'll do that for now. That gets it on there. Well, that's not exactly right now, is it? You know, I probably went characters with this. Oh yeah, labels use characters for their instead of pixels. So we're actually going to just remove this entirely because we don't need to set a height and width for a label because that's going to be measured in characters. There we go. That looks better and makes way more sense. Alright. Now, it's great that we can ask them to enter a file name, but we need to be able to get a response back, don't we? For that, we're going to use a text box. Just making sure I'm selecting the right one here because some programming languages, they use the same text box. For various things. Like a multi-line text box and a regular text box will be the same thing. And then in other cases, that'll be two different things. And I want to make sure... Make sure I'm using the right one here. Oh no, we're not using text box. We're using entry. That's what they call it in TK Enter. Forgot about that. Sorry, most everywhere else they call it a text box, but here we're gonna call it an entry. Once again, add your your parent widget. Now we can add a command that would change, or that would run a function every time the user changes what's in the text box. If we wanted, we could change the background color of the text box. We could change the text color. If we wanted to change this so that it looked like when you type in a password, it does all the little stars. We could set that here as well. Again, this takes a width and height. In order to set the size, but again, I believe it's in number of characters and not pixels. And then there is one we want to set. And I believe this is where we put the variable name that we'll call to get the value that the the user has put here. So when we type in a file name, we're going to want to be able to use that file name in our CruddyBuddy object. I'm pretty sure it's text variable. We forgot to add it again, didn't we? Yes, we did. You know, one of these days I'm going to get used to doing this. But like I said, it's been just so long since I actually... Since I actually worked with... Okay, let's see here. We're 10... This is the halfway point. We're about a quarter of the way across. Not bad. I mean, probably could have got closer. There we go. That's a little better. Alright. So now, if we type... Well, that's all well and good, but now it doesn't do anything. I mean, it takes the text, but it's not doing anything with it. Well, we're going to do something with it. I did make up an example for how to do this real quick. I'm going to refer to that here in a minute here, just because I was tinkering around with this before. Let's open that notepad. Well, that's not what I wanted. So this one. What am I open with? Open with notepad. Nope. Huh, I didn't save it. Okay, well that's annoying. Because I had looked up and pre-constructed one that shows that demonstrates how to take the information from here and display it
using a dialog box. So let me see if I can piece that together again here real quick. Okay, here we go.
Alright. We're gonna need a second button though. Because our first button, as you recall, exits. So what does this button do?
It's gonna call a message box.
Now there's a few kinds of message boxes you can use. There's a show info. There's a show warning. And we can show an error.
We can also
Do we can prompt the user for more information. Whoop. By asking a question. We can ask the user if they would like to proceed or not. Now you remember our little prompts, don't you, from the from our Cruddy Buddy app, where we gave specific confirm yes, confirm no. Well, our user interface TK-Inter package already kind of comes with that. We can even specifically ask yes or no. And if we get into handling exceptions and we run into errors, we can ask the user if they'd like to retry what they were doing or give up. For our purposes, though, for this demonstration, we're just going to use the show info.
Alright, now, the first is just the title.
I don't know if this allows for formatted strings or not, but we're going to find out. Let's see, we'll go 240. Y equals, what have we been using, 10? Apparently somebody is stomping around upstairs. And then our command here is going to be click button 2. Now I already can foresee there's probably gonna be a few issues with this, but let's see what happens. All right. Size this down so we can actually see what's going on here. TK message box is not defined. Is it just message box? Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, it should just be message box. There we go. Let's try that. Message box is not defined. What is going on here? File name is not selected. Is not the FN is not defined.
Okay. So that did not work quite like I had hoped, but we finally got the message box part to work. We just haven't got the value. Oh, okay. Let's see. I forget how to reference the value that's set in there.
Oh, there it is. All right. We need to call our get function on our label. And assign that to file n. And this should work. Or at least should work better. There we go. Hey, look at that. The same thing we typed in there showed up in our little message box, which means we can now work with the value that is entered into our entry box. And normally I would be streaming until 1 o'clock, but because it's a snow day, because the kid is home, and also I am super tired. I don't know if you've noticed this, but I've been a little low energy during this one. But this gives you a good place to start. We have buttons which allow us to call functions. You've seen how to do that with the command. You can set the text of your button, you can set the color of your button, you can set placement of things using complicated or very simple math. You've seen how to create a top level widget to add widgets to. You've seen how to use a message box. Sort of. I haven't really explained what this is, but basically what I did was just a string. I could make this file name entered. Alright, and by putting the F here, we're just saying that this string is going to contain some variable. Or, you know, possibly more variables. And then within the string itself, we put in these curly brackets with a variable name in there. And the formatting for the string will look for this variable and plug in place of this, whatever that value is. But you remember when we were doing, let me see if I can find it here. Like this line right here, where we have this placeholder, and we have this placeholder, and we have this that says these are the things that go there. This is a shorthand way of doing exactly that same thing. Alright, so instead of having to do this complicated thing in order to get our variable name into our string, we're just using this method instead. Does the same thing. It's just this is shorthand of the other way. There you go. Now, the super clever amongst you will be able to take this and run with it, and by the time I get back, you'll have this fully turned into just a full-on Excel spreadsheet level, table making, report making program that saves all of the input and output right to files. The not so clever of you will probably want to tune in next time while I try to do that myself. Now I'm not saying that the not so clever are dumb in any way. I'm just saying, like, you need a little walking through that. And it's understandable. I have not gone into great detail on a lot of the stuff you've seen. I have not given a whole lot of guidance. But, I mean, I'm trying to keep this from getting so bogged down that it takes forever to learn how to do anything. And it still feels like it's taking forever to learn how to do anything. But we have all of our cruddy buddy functions here already. What happened here? Because we didn't get our window. Why didn't we get our window? I'm confused. Save everything in my OneDrive folder. Maybe even move my documents folder into the OneDrive folder, and the reason for that. Alright, so we have Cruddy Buddy. So this will all, maybe I need to do... Oh, I know what I need to do. I need to not exit. There we go. I put the exit outside of the code block for our if statement. So by importing my Cruddy Buddy package, I believe it was completely canceling out my interface. Cruddy Buddy is not a package. Why can't I import that? What is going on here? Okay, let's do this then. Because I have used import. What are you talking about? That is exactly the proper syntax. Do I have to capitalize it?
Are you serious right now? Apparently our help file is not going to tell us about import.
All right, I know. I think I'm gonna try this.
Is that what we called it?
Yes. Okay.
I wonder if it's trying to import from the wrong directory. Do I have to set up a directory for this? I probably have to set up a directory for this.
Maybe it's something as stupid as I'm not supposed to have the file extension. Is that it?
My interpreter is too big.
Okay, so there it is. Yeah. I was doing that. I don't need to do that. Okay. There we go. We've imported our file. Apparently we didn't need the extension, and that was what was tripping me up. But now, all of the functions that are in our Cruddy Buddy, all of the objects and whatnot, the read file, write file, all of that stuff, it's there. We got from the user how, or I'm sorry, not how, but what file name we want to use. Using the functions that we've just imported from Cruddy Buddy. The create file, read file, update file, delete file, create record, read record, update record, and delete record. And using these, the text box and the button widgets that we've figured out how to use, should be able to make the a graphic user interface for our Cruddy Buddy program. Now I'm going to leave it up to you to toy around with it until next time, and then next time I will walk you through how we set up each of the functions, how we set up that file creation, how we set up creating records, how we get it to print out different labels and text boxes for each of the fields, how we ask the user how many fields, because we can do that now. We'll ask them, and then we'll cycle through depending upon a number they specify ahead of time, rather than asking if they want to continue or continue or continue. And there's a couple different ways we can handle all of these scenarios now, because we're working with Windows. We're working with a graphic interface that is a lot more user-friendly for the user than the command line was. For the programmer, graphic user interface, as you've seen, it's a little more complicated, but once you get used to it, it's really not that bad. Only reason I'm struggling with it as much as I have been is because the amount of programming I actually have done lately on my desktop where I'm using tkinter has been not a whole lot recently. It's been a while since I've had to use this one. While I'm on my Android phone, I just use the command line. I would use Kyvie, but I have not successfully gotten Kyvie to work on my desktop. And if I'm going to use a graphic interface, I want it to be available on every device that I'm coding on so that I can test the same code on every device that I'm coding on. Because I'm a coder who will code on the desktop, save that file to the cloud, pull it up on my phone while I'm, out doing stuff. If inspiration strikes, and I'll update it while I'm there. And then I'll test it on my phone. I'll get home. I'll open it up on my desktop again. I'll test it on my desktop. I'll pull it up on my tablet while I'm at dinner. I'll do stuff like that. But I want to be able to use all of it on all of my devices. And Kyvie is supposed to be an interface that can do that. However, every time I've tried to install Kyvie, I run into the same problem. It's not ready for the version of Python that I'm trying to use. Right now we have Python 10 on desktop. That's the one that I showed you how to install. Unfortunately, Python 10 is new as of November 1st. It's the new iteration of Python 3. Python 3.10. That's the newest version. And Kyvie, because it's not an official part of Python, it's something someone else wrote that you are free to use, but it's not maintained by the official Python team. I mean, they may work close together, they may talk to each other, heck, they may even get coffee once in a while together. I don't know. I don't know what their relationship is. All I know is they're two separate entities. Kyvie isn't always as up to date on the latest version of Python. And since we're using the latest version of Python, there is no Kyvie version that's currently available. And I run into this issue almost every single time I am working with a graphic user interface. So most of the time I just do command line stuff. That's not to say I haven't done graphic user interfaces, and normally I don't have this much trouble, but it's been a while since I've actually had to work with it. So, you know, if it seemed a little disjointed, it's because it is. It is. I have spent the last few days looking up a lot of this stuff again to refresh it in my memory. However, not as much of it stuck as I had hoped. But we were still able to figure out, you know, the things we needed. So you now have enough information here that you can make a window, you can resize a window, you can name a window, you can add buttons and text boxes to your window, you can make functions run by clicking on your button, you can take the information from the text box and add it into whatever you need. Like our message box.info, where we actually use the file name there. That's just one example of where you can use it and how you can use it. You can use that .get functionality of our entry widget anywhere in this app. So, you know, you're going to want to write functions that call functions after pulling the information that we need. Like, as you can see, our click button 1, click button 2, there's no parameters being fed in there. We're getting the information inside of the function by calling these other methods of the widgets. There may be a way to pass parameters when you click a button, but I'm not sure how it's done. Because as you look at the command line, all it is a callback to the function without a parameter list. It's entirely possible there may be a value that you know, is the parameter list, and I'm just not setting it. But this works. This is a way to do it. This is a simple way to do it that doesn't require us looking up stuff. It's a little bit more roundabout, but we're not going for enterprise professional level here. And for all I know, maybe this is actually the way to do it. But anyway, play around, see what you can build. Next time, like I said, I'll walk you through the creation of actually, you know, stable, sturdy, you know, decent looking interface for our Cruddy Buddy object that we've made previously. So we'll be using all of those same functions. We'll be learning how to pass the proper values into those functions from the input boxes. I'll even show you how to add input boxes on the fly so that when our user has, you know, 15 fields or 5 fields or 3 fields, it'll show you just the right number. There won't be a whole bunch of extra ones. And yeah. Hopefully you'll start to see how this is all coming together to make an actual desktop application. In future sessions, I want to also show you how to use Pygame to make Python games. Because, like I said, when we're all done with this, it'd be cool to make a game. You know, and y'all could give input on that if you wanted to. Y'all could be a participant of that. I'm going to make the repository where the code for the game is stored public, so you could submit your own changes to it. and participate in the building of the game. But for that, we're going to use Pygame. But before we get into Pygame, we have to figure out graphic user interfaces a little bit more. So we're gonna come back and we're gonna tackle this a little bit more. And when we do get to Pygame, we're gonna also have to cover a couple other things like virtual environments. They are technically optional, but for an ounce of prevention, we can prevent a whole world of hurt. And what a virtual environment does is it just gives us a safe place where we can play with those other modules that we're importing, like Kyvie, like Pygame. These are libraries of code that you can use in Python, but they're not officially a part of Python. They are other people's projects to help you make cool stuff in Python. But like with the Kyvie problem, where a new version of Python comes out and they're not up to date, you may want to be able to use an older version of Python to make it work. You know, that kind of thing. And we're gonna have to figure out how to do that when we get to Kyvie. I may have to install Python 3.9 instead of 3.10. I'm not thrilled by that. I don't like stepping down a version, and we're definitely going to want to set up a virtual environment so that outside of the Kyvie development environment, we're using the latest Python, but inside the Kyvie development environment, we're using the one that works. Because otherwise, nothing works. So, for going forward from here, it's going to get a little more confusing. But we may actually hold off on the Kyvie and Pygame until after we figure out sockets. Sockets are another library within Python that lets you communicate with other computers across the network. So, the internet. You'd be able to write online functionality into your apps, into your programs. You can make your program on your computer communicate with a program on a friend's computer. I mean, you'd probably have to write both of these programs and then give the one program to your friend, have them fire it up, and they'd be able to talk back and forth. But I'll show you what you're able to do with that. I'll show you how you can use that in your own code. We may be able to turn our Cruddy Buddy app into a program that not only can write a file to our own file system, but can actually be used to move files from this computer to another computer, or, you know, wherever we need it to go. We could even use it to upload our program, or upload our files, you know, possibly even to a cloud storage, maybe, if we had a proper API, that kind of thing. But we'll get into all kinds of trouble down the road. Like I said, quick session. I do need to go make my son some lunch here. So I am cutting this short for that reason. But next week, we're going to get more into the graphic user interface. Feel free to play around with what you've learned so far. See what you can do. See what you can make. Maybe you'll even come up with a better way to do things than what I show you next week. And I'm going to use the weekend to try to brush up on my TK Inter a bit more, because I haven't messed with this for quite a while, and the brief review that I gave myself, I missed some stuff. Clearly, I missed some stuff, but it happens. Thank you all for joining me for this one. Hopefully, your snow day is as fun as mine. Hopefully you had fun.
Be sure to follow if you want to know when I'm live. I do follow back, so if you want to increase your follow count, like, go ahead and add a follow. I'll happily follow you back. That way, we both win. If you have questions, or you just want to shout at me or tell me I'm an idiot, or think that, you know, you could do a better job of teaching Python than me, feel free to hop over to Discord and state your peace of mind. Links there on the screen. That's a non-expiring link to join my Discord. You can also check out my other rantings and ravings at my website there. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and thanks for tuning in.